This is a social science passage on the SAT reading section, and that means we're going to be asked about arguments and ideas and data in these questions. So what I'm going to do in this video is begin the process of SQ3Rs, that's survey, question, read, recite, review. So we're just going to do the first two steps. So in the survey, I'm going to bounce through the passage very quickly. I'm going to bounce through the questions very quickly. When we get to the end of it, I'll ask myself the question, what is this about? What am I expected to know? I'm doing this slowed down for instructional purposes. As you practice, take it at whatever pace you like, but I'm trying to teach you a skill for how to be efficient when test day rolls around. The purpose of this strategy of surveying and then asking yourself what you've just surveyed is to help you from getting bogged down in the passage and its questions. We want you to feel confident, we want you to feel assured, and we want you to have plenty of time. You've got this. So for the survey step, I'm scoping out the passage. I'm going to be skimming it. I'm going to be looking at the first line of every paragraph, and I'll pick up a little content, but I am mostly just trying to suss out the shape of the passage and its argument. What the author is trying to do, what ideas are being put forward. We're just trying to do this very quickly. So I'll put a little dot every time I start a new paragraph. So let's dive into it. To begin with, let's just talk about this blurb up here. The blurb is super important. Sometimes there can be very important information just living in there that's free for the taking. So this passage is adapted from Ian King, Can Economics Be Ethical? And right there, I feel like we've got a main question, right? If the title of the passage asks a question, I think we can rest assured that that's probably a main idea of the passage, and you're probably going to be asked a question about that. So let's hold that in our mind as we push through. Paragraph 1. Recent debates about the economy have rediscovered the question, is that right? Where right means more than just profits or efficiency. So I think this is probably going to be connected somehow to the question, can economics be ethical? We don't have to really consider that right now, just hold it in the back of your mind. Let's press on. Paragraph 2. Some argue that because the free markets allow for personal choice, they are already ethical. So this is setting up that there's going to be a debate in this passage. It looks like we have others have other ideas, and then it looks like there's a complication down here with like, but before we can label, but we're only really looking at the first sentence of each paragraph. So let's keep going. There are different views on where ethics should apply when someone makes an economic decision. Okay, this is going to set up some of those different views. And I see here we've got a name, Adam Smith. I'm going to underline that. We're looking for the names of people or the titles of books. Skimming this paragraph, I also see the wealth of nations over here. When the passage deploys names, it makes sense to pay attention to them because there might be questions that are attached to those names and maybe the philosophies associated with those names in this case. Here's the next paragraph, paragraph 4. Instead of judging consequences, Aristotle, there's another name, said ethics was about having the right character, displaying virtues like courage and honesty. Now, again, we haven't been reading the passage very closely, but because of the way this sentence begins, instead of judging consequences, Aristotle said, I get the impression that this is being put here to contrast some earlier idea in the previous paragraph. Something to think about. All right, let's move on to paragraph number 5. Instead of rooting ethics in the character or the consequences of actions, we can focus on the actions themselves. So it sounds like this is a third distinct idea. We've got the Smith thing in paragraph 3, we've got the Aristotle thing in paragraph 4, we've got this other approach in paragraph 5. I'm going to move on down here to paragraph 6. Many moral dilemmas arise when these three versions, pull in different directions, but clashes are not inevitable. And then I see something in here about fair trade coffee. I'll underline that, see if that's important. Like they're introducing a new concept. Let's move on over here to paragraph 7. Whenever we feel queasy about quote-unquote perfect competitive markets, the problem is often rooted in a phony conception of people. Okay, so it doesn't sound like this paragraph is going to introduce a new claim. It doesn't sound like it's one of the 3 claims, but it does sound like it's complicating something somehow. And I see here, just letting my eyes flow over the paragraph, that I see the name John Stuart Mill, who is, it seems, another philosopher. All right, and let's take a look at this final paragraph. These human quirks mean that we can never make purely rational decisions. So these human quirks, it seems like it's probably referring to the previous paragraph, but we don't have to dive into that right now. So whatever this complication is, it's being elaborated upon in this final paragraph. Let's look at the last line. Ethical economics would then emerge from one of the least likely places, economists themselves. Cool. I don't really know what that means quite yet, but that's okay. Now, I know that because this is a social sciences passage, there's also a graph. So let's take a look down at the graph, see what we can make of it. I'm going to zoom out very slightly. There we are. Okay, so we're basically going to survey the graph in the same way that we surveyed the passage, trying to figure out what it's about and what it's trying to say. So, okay, regular coffee profits compared to fair trade coffee profits in Tanzania. Now, if you'll remember, a couple paragraphs ago in the passage, they did mention fair trade coffee in we noticed it in passing. And so let's take a look at the X and Y axes. Okay, so the X axis has the year, the Y axis is amount of what? US cents per pound. Okay, so this is the amount of profit in US cents per pound for fair trade coffee, which according to the legend is the dotted line, and regular coffee, which is the unbroken line. So looking at this straight away, I can determine that fair trade coffee is consistently more profitable, or has been more profitable from a period beginning in 2000 and ending in 2008 than regular coffee. It sells at about, $1.30 per pound. You have $1.30 of profit to, $1.39 versus conventional coffee, which kind of seems to fluctuate between 60, 61 to just over 20 cents per pound. So we've looked at the graph. Let's take a quick spin through the questions, and then we'll do the question step, which is ask ourselves, what is this passage asking? So question number 1, the main purpose of the passage is to blank. And honestly, I think we could probably answer this question right now if we wanted to. I'm going to put a little star here. I think that there are questions that we could answer after we've completed this quick reading step, after we've completed this survey, without doing an active reading step. Question 2, in the passage, the author anticipates which of the following objections to criticizing the ethics of free markets. Cool, I think we could probably connect that back to the beginning of paragraph 2, but we don't have to think about that super hard right now. And then question 3 is looking for a textual justification for that answer, so we'd have to find which line represents it. Now, I am going to mark line references only when they're in the question stem. So not when they're in the individual answer choices, but I am going to mark up the passage where I see a reference to a question. So for example, in question 4, that calls out line 6. As used in line 6, embraced most nearly means blank. Okay, so I've underlined it. I'm going to write 4 in the margin. And honestly, that's just a vocabulary in context question. You don't need to understand the whole passage in order to answer that question. I think we could answer that one right now. Question number 5 is about the 5th paragraph, lines 38 through 47. Okay, I'm just gonna write a little 5 there. And I think that we could probably take a crack at answering that one if we just spent a couple seconds looking at what the 5th paragraph says. Let's keep going to question number 6. Which calls out line 49, the word clashes. As used in line 49, clashes most nearly means... Cool, I've underlined it. That's another vocabulary and context question. I think we could answer that one before an active reading step 2. Question 7 is a cite your sources sort of question. Wants us to cite textual evidence. I don't want to get lost in the weeds in that right now, but it says, which choice best supports the author's claim that there is common ground shared by the different approaches to ethics described in the passage? And then it's got a bunch of different line citations. Question 8, the main idea of the final paragraph, so let me mark that. Question 8. I think we could probably answer that one straight off as well, because it feels like there's a topic sentence right in that first sentence. These human quirks mean we can never make purely rational decisions. I think we could do that one without even diving into the rest of the passage. And then the last 3 questions, 9, 10, 11, are all about the graph. And it looks, so data, number 9, data in the graph about per pound coffee profits in Tanzania most strongly support which of the following statements? And then there's no reference back to the passage. I think we could solve that just by looking at the graph. Question number 10, data in the graph indicate that the greatest difference between per pound profits from fair trade coffee and those from regular coffee occurred during which period? Let's take a look at the graph. I think we could probably... Honestly, I think we could solve that one right now. Like, that's just, where's the biggest profit difference between, the two varieties of coffee? I think we could solve that one straight away. I barely have to look at it. What is it, 2002 to 2004? Yeah, I mean, that's there. That's like one of the answers. But let's erase that. Save it for later. And finally, question 11, data in the graph provide the most direct support for which idea in the passage? And again, I think we could probably answer this question without doing a deep dive into the passage, so I'm going to star that one as well. If you're feeling pressed for time as you go through the passage, I would do these starred questions first, and then use the remainder of the time to go through the questions that require you to dig deeper into the text. So that's the S phase. We have now surveyed the passage, and now I want you to ask yourself, Q, a question. What's this passage about? What are we trying to figure out here? What's the question being asked, or what are the claims being made in this passage? And honestly, I think we know that. It's right there in the title of the piece. It's trying to answer the question, can economics be ethical? And then it's trying to run down different claims to how it can be ethical. And I know we have at least 3 ideas that are in tension with each other. And that's, again, just from a quick skim of the passage. There's a lot you can pick up with a quick skim like that. All right, now if you want to keep watching, the next thing I'm going to do is the 3 R steps, the read, recite, review. And that's going to be a much more active reading phase as I go through the passage and break it down component by component. If you want to skip that, I'll meet you over at the question by question breakdown a video or 2 from now.